What a beautiful morning already. I'm so glad you're all here. Thanks for gifting us with, everything you're giving us this morning. Your time, your presence, and for many of you, even your vulnerability. I mean, that's a difficult thing to ask. And I just want you to know that we as a church don't take any of those offerings lightly. We respect and value all of those. And I pray that as a church, we would always be faithful to everything with which you entrust us. This church is a unique gift. And it's been a unique gift to myself and to my family for just about 20 years now. Someone this morning, Jim asked me, how long have I been here? And I said, wow, this will be 20 years this year. And or just last fall for me. But at any rate, I wanted to share a little bit about how my family came to be here. So Erica and I were married in June of 2004. Fast forward 3 months, and in the early hours of September 2nd, 2004, Erica had a dream. She stirred me from sleep and shared the dream, and we believed that it was a prophetic dream calling us to move to Westchester. Those were the words and our theology at that time. And we believed this so strongly that we gave our 2 weeks' notice at our jobs that morning, like hours after the dream. Like we went in that morning, we gave our 2 weeks' notice, and we moved to Westchester 14 days later. Like the day after our 14 days' notice, we moved here the next morning. And in the years that have followed, I have come to term this day, September 16th, our leap-iversary. And I commemorate it every year, like the year we took this leap of faith. And I reflect on that journey and our journey, since then, each year, every year on that day. And one such year, 5 years ago, I was writing my annual reflection, just stream of consciousness, as fast as my little fingers could type, which is fairly fast. I am an Enneagram 3. But the words were flowing out of my fingertips when a new phrase poured out that I'd never thought or heard before. I've Googled it since, but I haven't found any reference to it. So I think I may have created it in so much as any word or phrase can be created or novel. So have I piqued your interest? Good. Well, put a pin in that, but I promise I'll come back before we're done. For now, let's dig into today's text. We're in Hebrews 11, and as you've probably heard, as you've heard from every single preacher so far, all 3 of my predecessors, as I am week 4 in this new series, it's a hard knock life out in these Hebrews 11 streets. So settle in, shift that weight, lean back, get comfortable in your chair, take a deep, resetting breath, and here we go. 1 verse. But don't worry, your high context boy has got this. In fact, he was born for this. Hebrews 11:5. By faith. Yes, we're only 2 words in and we're stopping already. I told you, I got this. Every section in this chapter starts with this phrase, by faith. So by faith, blank, blanked, and then there's a little bit more. And then by faith, blank, blanked, and then there's a little more. And by faith, blank, blanked, and there's a little more. But the author's using this phrase to frame this whole chapter. So the Greek word used here is pistis. And yes, that's a Greek word to a Hebrew audience. Some believe the letter may have originally been written in Hebrew since it was written to the Hebrews and later translated into Greek. But our scriptures that we have today were translated from the Greek and framed around this Greek word. So that is the word I give you, pistis. Means persuasion, credence, moral conviction. It's the noun form of the root word pitho, which is a verb meaning to persuade, induce one to believe, convince. So pistis being the noun form means the persuaded or the convinced, the believing, the faith. See, it's a noun, so it's the substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not seen. The person, place, thing, and idea, pistis. It appears 243 times in 227 verses across the New Testament, and 24 of those are in this chapter of Hebrew alone. That's 1 in every 10 usages just in this chapter of Hebrews. So continuing on, by faith, Enoch, our man of the hour, Enoch means dedicated, in both Greek and in Hebrew. And we'll see if he lives up to it, or perhaps if maybe he personified this idea so much that it became the meaning of that word because of him. Well, we'll see. So by faith, Enoch was taken. And this isn't actually the best translation of this word, but it may have been part of like a more idiomatic saying or a cultural understanding, because the word that's used here is metithemi. And metithemi more closely means to transpose. So as a musician, when I hear the word transpose, I think of, to change keys. But more generally, it just means to switch the position of two things. So it also means to transfer or even to translate. And I really like that translation too. And in fact, the King James version of this verse uses that translation of the word. See what I did there? Wherein the verse actually reads as, "By faith Enoch was translated, that he should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony, that he pleased God." But you can see that isn't quite as clear to our modern eyes and ears. So it is translated for us as, "was taken from this life," so that he did not experience death. And all of those words are pretty straightforward, the Greek. It's not see death. He could not be, it goes on, he could not be found because God had taken him away. And that's a direct quote from Genesis 5:24. And it ends with, "For before he was taken up," or translated, "he was commended as one who pleased God." And he was commended is actually the word martyreo. He obtained the witness. If you're familiar with the word martyr, meaning witness, that word is in there, martyreo. As one who, I'm never going to get this one, you are estemio, theos. I struggled with this one. I wrote it out 10 different ways and none of them helped. It's up there, that one. Pleased God, which he did. And like last week, the author does not elaborate on why or how Enoch pleased God. Simply states that he did. And that's all we get. That's Hebrews 11, verse 5. But what else do we know about Enoch? We also have Genesis chapter 5, verses 21 to 24. And I'm going to start with just a brief synopsis in Genesis 5 in general. If Hebrews is the by faith chapter, Genesis 5 would be the and he died chapter. So we have lots of these. Altogether, Adam lived a total of 930 years, and then he died. Altogether, Seth lived a total of 912 years, and then he died. Altogether, Enosh lived a total of 905 years, and then he died. Altogether, Kenan lived a total of 910 years, and then, you guessed it, he died. Altogether, Mahalalel lived a total of 895 years, and then he died. Altogether, Jared lived a total of 962 years, and then he died. And then something unexpected happened. In the 7th generation of Adam, picking back up in that verse 21 we get, when Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. But wait, and Enoch walked faithfully with God, and then he was no more, because God took him away. And not a single word more is said about that either. That's it. Do you know how many people are recorded in the Bible as not dying and just going to heaven? I'm only aware of 2. Yeah. Enoch and Elijah. That's it. And we get all kinds of details on Elijah, all kinds of stories about Elijah, but this is all we get on Enoch. This is it. I did, however, discover something personally in this look at Genesis 5 that I felt exposed one of my 21st century biases a bit. And I think it's healthy and helpful to identify those things and be mindful of them. Because I do believe we bring ourselves and our experience to our reading of Scripture. I think that's innately human, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's a natural practice. because we're invited into relationship with God, and reading and relating to the scriptures can be one meaningful way of experiencing relationship with God. But I also believe it can be helpful to acknowledge this because it can acknowledge a general reality of scripture being sifted through human experience. And in a way that I believe is not all that unique from the way it was sifted through experiences and perspectives and biases of the many different writers of scripture, and then was sifted through their different and diverse audiences. And this is not dissimilar to how Jesus himself became the Word incarnate, embodied, human. He had experiences. And this is how I like to imagine our interactions with scripture can be. Like spending time with the living Word themselves. And so my discovery, my bias, the average life expectancy in the United States in 2024 is 79.9 years. So our perception of life and generations is informed and biased by this reality that we have. And we've all experienced this in the passing of, great-grandparents and grandparents, and for some of us, even parents. So even though we read Adam lived a total of 930 years and then he died, we don't have that context. It's not really part of our context. And here's my point. Look at this graphic that lists these generations of Adam that we just read on a timeline. Would you be surprised to learn that Enoch, well, not died, but was translated only 57 years after Adam died? Like, this genealogy dating back to Adam, Enoch is the 7th generation from Adam, but the 2nd patriarch whose life on this earth ended. Second only to Adam himself, and 55 years before Adam's son Seth died. And I just find that realization interesting. I've read these genealogies since I was a kid, and I've never made this particular connection before. And I highlight that simply to help us ask these types of questions. In what other ways do we bring our 21st century sensibilities to Scripture? Our post-Enlightenment understanding of understanding, or our age of reason expectations? And that's a question that may have scared me a few years ago, if I'm honest. But I no longer view curiosity as an affront to faith or to trust or to truth. Rather, I view the truth as having nothing to fear, but precisely that fear itself. And I see the scriptures actually inviting us to ask, seek, knock. Now, moving beyond Genesis, which gives us as much as any source does, albeit not much, we also have these few references to Enoch. So since there are so few and they are so limited, I'm just going to give them to you all. It will take like 30 seconds. 1 Chronicles 1:3, which only lists his name, and it lists it as Henoch with an H. But Henoch, Methuselah, Lamech. And then jumping centuries forward again, we have a reference in Luke chapter 3:37. I actually referenced this in my last sermon during Advent. Again, limited to a name and a genealogy, but this time as Enoch again with an E. Luke 3:37, which was the son of Methuselah, which was the son of Enoch, which was the son of Jared. Then we get our Hebrew verse, and then the most controversial reference of all, in Jude, which has no chapters because it's just one, but in verses 14 and 15, where we get, and Enoch also, the 7th from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment on them all. It goes on. And to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches with ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Methinks Jude and Enoch may have been feeling a bit of a way here. But tone aside, there's no new content about Enoch, just this prophecy attributed to Enoch. And this is also a direct quote from the book of Enoch, which you may or may not have heard of. And as I mentioned, Jude's not a long book. It's one chapter, it's 25 total verses, and this quote from the book of Enoch is 10% of the total words used in the Jude's entire epistle. Now, the book of Enoch is a pseudo-epigraphical, I'm going to get these words, man. Pseudo meaning false and epigraph meaning inscription or name. So basically meaning false or questionable title. The book of Enoch is believed to have originally been accepted by the Christian church, as evidenced by its presence in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but was obviously later excluded from the biblical canon because you will not find it in our Bible. It falls in the pseudepigraphical category because it is titled as if it was written by Enoch, seventh generation from Adam, but has been largely questioned because it's believed to have been written in the 3rd century BC, obviously much, much later. And yet Jude includes it as accepted reference material and doubles down on his belief that this was written by the one and the same Enoch, 7th generation from Adam. But I'm not here to debate the provenance of pseudepigraphical works, nor am I here to translate and study the largely apocryphal content of the book of Enoch. I'm here because the unknown author of Hebrews was compelled to include Enoch in his or her, probably him, but we don't know, hall of faith. And do you know how many heroes are cited in this by faith format in Hebrews 11? It's 10. 10 inductees, if you will. And remember, we're taking this sermon series to look back at them, to observe how these men and women, yes, there are 2 women that made this list of 10, 20% representation, looked forward in truth and in faith so that we too can learn how to look forward in faith and in so doing inform the way we live now in the present. And of these 10 men and women, second in this author's list is Enoch. And why? I mean, if you're only going to list 10 people, would Enoch really have made the cut? Would he really have been one of the top 10 people to come to your mind? Well, for this author, it becomes clear as we continue to journey through this chapter, or it will become clear as we continue to journey together through it, that heaven is the ultimate hope for this author, and faith is the means by which we arrive there. So using that rubric, it becomes a little clearer why this author would choose a man whose entire life is encapsulated as, and Enoch walked faithfully with God, and then he was no more because God took him away. If this is their foundational goal, be faithful, avoid death, walk faithfully, get to heaven. From that paradigm, it's no wonder he was selected as an inaugural inductee into the Hall of Faith. And that's how I believe the author of Hebrews would answer that question, why Enoch? But now for my answer. Why Enoch? Well, I appreciate Enoch's presence here because amid all the examples that come before and after, and the one right before it last week Sonda preached was of Abel, and in Abel's listed here, it says he's listed because he's an example of right sacrifice. And then the one that immediately follows Enoch, that we're going to get to in 2 weeks, is Noah. And it's listed that he's included because by faith of obedience by holy fear, he is included as in this. But sandwiched between these two, between sacrifice and obedience through holy fear, we have Enoch, who's listed simply because of relational intimacy. We've read all the scriptures on him. We don't get anything more. It all comes down to he's here in this list because he walked with God. It's literally the only thing we do know about him. He walked with God. He walked with God here on earth, and then that just translated to him walking with God in heaven. We don't have any other acts of faith to go on. We don't see any sacrifices made by Enoch. We don't read any great acts of obedience of the likes that would require faith, like building an ark for a flood before it may have ever rained, or having a child in old age, or being willing to sacrifice that long-awaited child. All we see, all we read, is he walked faithfully with God. Relational intimacy. And when we look back in order to observe how Enoch looked forward in faith, we see he walked with God, and I just love that. And that got me to thinking, where else do we see God walking in Genesis? Yeah, it immediately came to my mind as I was thinking about this idea of walking with God. It's right there, just 2 chapters earlier. In Genesis 3, in the account of the fall, even there, after the fall, they heard the sound of God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Do you remember that? And this is evidence that the fall didn't stop God from walking with Adam and Eve. Their shame stopped Adam and Eve from walking with God. Let me say that again, because this wrecked me. I hadn't quite realized this either till I was studying it anew this time. The fall didn't stop God from walking with Adam and Eve. Their shame stopped Adam and Eve from joining God on their walk. They eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, desiring to possess its knowledge within themselves rather than possessing it through their relationship with God, which they already had. And yet God still showed up for their evening walk. They hide, and he asks, "Where are you?" He doesn't ask, "What have you done?" He doesn't shout, "Show yourselves." He asks, "Where are you?" And even when they say, "We heard you walking in the garden," which means Adam and Eve knew the sound of God walking in the garden. They recognized it. I believe they recognized the sound of God walking in the garden in the cool of the day because they were familiar with it. Maybe it was a daily ritual. Maybe they all liked long walks on the beach in the Garden of Eden at sunset in the cool of the day. But when asked where they were, they answer, "We heard you walking in the garden and we hid because we were naked." And even then, God's next question is really telling. He says, "Who told you you were naked?" And if we think about that, which again I hadn't done, who do we observe telling them that they were naked? They did. They realized they were naked, not the serpent. They were their own accusers, according to the scriptures here. And if that doesn't preach, I'm not sure what will. When we fail, God doesn't stop walking with us. The temptation is for us to stop walking with God. And even then, God pursues us, asking, "Where are you?" From our hiding spots behind the trees, we say we're ashamed, naked. And like Adam and Eve, how often are we the ones shaming ourselves, reciting these narratives of unworthiness? Yet God, through personal sacrifice, covers our nakedness, removing our own perceptions of personal shame. Why? Because God still desires us to walk with them. Remembered, they never stopped walking with us. Even in life after Eden, listen to this. It says, "With the help of the Lord," Eve said, "I have brought forth a man." God continued to walk with her. And last Sunday, Reverend Sandra went on to share at great length and in a phenomenal message. Like, if you haven't heard it, you have to seek it out. On Facebook, YouTube, our website, it's everywhere. Find it somewhere. It's a very moving message that, among many other things, also demonstrated that God never stopped walking with Cain. Not when Cain was angry, not even after Cain had murdered Abel. Even then, God pursued him. Can we start to see? God will never stop walking with us. The image of the Messiah is the image of God coming to walk with us. And if we have seen Christ, we've seen the Father. And what do we see Christ doing? Walking with everyone. The in, the out, the with, the without, the old, the young, the men, the women, the demoniac, the devout. The question before each of us is always and will forever remain, will we choose to walk with God? And when shame comes, and it does, will we hide or will we confess it and keep moving? Will we learn to keep walking, to reorient ourselves and keep moving forward? Because this life has a current. The timeline is a moving stream. So while we are standing still, hiding behind a tree, we're actually drifting. Drifting away from the center. Drifting away from Christ. So let's learn and normalize the practice of reorienting and continuing to move forward. Like Enoch, let's walk faithfully with God. And whether it brings earth to heaven like it did for Enoch, or if it brings heaven to earth, it will surely transform our lives. And now for that pin. As promised. Here is my reflection on September 16th, 2019, our leap-iversary 5 years ago. Happy leap-iversary, Erica. Man, I'm such a wreck. You love me anyway. For any of you who are unfamiliar with this term, this is the day Erica and I took a leap of faith and moved to Westchester. This day always prompts reflection for me. 15 years ago today, we packed up our young 22-year-old lives and our wedding registry of belongings into my old Chevy Malibu and leapt. In some ways, I didn't and couldn't understand how far that leap would be, or just how long it would be until we felt ground beneath our feet again. I could say we landed in Westchester 15 years ago today at that time. And in some ways we did. Our physical address did change that day. But in many other ways, our hearts were both here and there, back with our families who remained 4 hours away in Tyrone. We also left what little, and I do mean little, financial stability we had started to build in the first 2.5 months of our young marriage. And in many ways, I don't believe we began to feel that earth beneath our feet again for years. And even then, it was thin earth. But there were moments where we felt like we were standing on firm air. Nothing this world could see, but firm in the belief that we were walking out our calling. It seems that we are often tasked with straddling the line between terra firma and terra fidem, faith ground. And yes, I created this word for this context. Sometimes it's as exciting as it sounds. Others, it is as terrifying as it sounds. But in time, we have found our footing on both. I credit our relationship for that. We are at the same time a great synergy and counterweight for one another. They say opposites attract, but I say complements last. And you, my love, are my perfect complement. It's as if God took a rib from my very own side and breathed his creative life into it. You are my Eve, which literally translates to breathe, to live, to give life. You have walked this earth with me, left it behind as we leapt into the air, walked on air with me, reached for the ground with me, and learned to walk a radical middle, straddling this line between terra firma and terra fidem. And above all else that I have loved and grieved and learned and loved again, I cherish you and the us that has resulted from this life we are walking. There is a terra firma that we walk in this life. That one I didn't create. Terra firma, solid ground. And there's nothing wrong with walking that ground. I'm not here to shame that ground. Who here likes solid ground? Yeah, me too. Seriously, I like the feeling of earth beneath my feet. And I've experienced a lot of life and learning on that ground. And I believe there is a terra fidem, that we can walk in this life too, a faith ground. Who here could testify about a moment when the earth fell out from beneath their feet and yet they found themselves walking on a different soil? A soil that felt like the substance of things hoped for. An earth that felt more like the evidence of things not seen. A soil that doesn't make sense. A ground that had no grounding in the natural, but gave us a place to plant our feet as we continued to walk by faith. And again, me too. I've experienced a lot of life and learning on that ground too. And I have found it is God's presence walking with me that makes Edens out of wastelands. Even in the shadow of death, I know you are with me. And this is important too. It doesn't matter how we got to the shadows. I think sometimes we make this distinction that like if it's not our fault and life just happens to us, well then of course God would be merciful. But if we make a mess of it ourselves, then like it's our own fault and we should punish ourselves. But David, the same man, I was just reflecting on this morning. David, the same man, in Psalm 23, we hear, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. That's kind of like when life happens. You're walking and you're walking through the shadow. You didn't do anything necessarily to get there, but you're walking through the shadow of death. You are with me. The same David writes in Psalm 139, even if I make my bed in the depths, you are there. You are there. God does not stop walking with us. I want to invite us to take some time this week and express our gratitude to God for continuing to walk with us through failure, shame, envy, anger, and in Cain's case, even murder. For there truly is nothing that will separate us. I also want to challenge us to consider, what are the areas that make us feel naked and ashamed? What are the thoughts or behaviors that make us want to hide? And then I want to challenge us to listen for the sound of God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Can we hear God call for us and see that they have covered our perceived shame so we can move forward together? Can we live our lives now inspired by the way we look back and see Enoch lived his, by walking faithfully with God on both terra firma and terra fidem? Amen.